Thank you very much for joining me in my talk. As she said, I'm Marion, also known as Ruby Dwarf for obvious reasons. And I'm working for Simplificator as a junior developer. The reason why I'm here is that I myself learned to program with Ruby, and I am now teaching others that are doing the same thing. And many people, some of them are here, they helped me with learning to program. And I realized that sometimes for very experienced programmers, it's hard to understand beginners' problems because it's already so natural for them. So if you ever work with interns or juniors, this talk might have some interesting insights for you. Also, in the end, I will have a short section about women in programming because I think it's an important topic that is not addressed enough. So first, I want to tell you how I came to be a programmer. This was a roughly 1.5-year journey, filled with moments of astonishing amazement about what I could do with programming, but also pain in the ass moments where I would freak out because stuff just didn't work. So first, my previous education, and I swear this is the only slide with bullet points, is I did my bachelor in translation and then my master's in business administration. And at that point, I had already worked at 2 big companies, which is FIFA and Swissport. So I already knew that I didn't want to work again in a company where I would just be a number and doing the same things over again. So I quit my job and I finished my master's and I asked myself what I should do. And many of my fellow student colleagues, they went for banks and insurances. So obviously this was not what I wanted. What I did want was an interesting job where I had to learn new things every day and to work with interesting people. And also I like good working conditions like unpaid leave and flexible hours. So at that point, I had been with my boyfriend for many years and he had been a programmer ever since I've known him. But until that point, I've never shown the slightest interest to learn it myself. But then I was really desperate for a challenge, so I asked him for some online tutorials when we were on the Philippines. And then I woke up at 6 o'clock, like 3 mornings in a row, and did those tutorials. And in the end of the holidays, I decided to become a programmer. So first, I tried self-study. So I took on a 50% job as an accountant just to buy food and pay rent. And the rest I would stay at home and doing online tutorials. So this was very successful at the beginning because I learned a lot of things in a short period of time. There are many good online tutorials, but also there were some drawbacks. For example, motivation was a problem. Because if you're just home alone, it's just easier to get another ice cream instead of working on a problem if things don't work. And also, there was no link to practice for me. So I think at some point I knew all the methods on string, but I had no idea where to use them in practice. And I had also never written a whole program by myself. So I knocked at the door of Simplificator. I had already picked them out as my favorite company to work before I started self-study and asked for an internship, and they told me that they don't have one. And then I thought I could accept that, but I really want to work there, so I sent an email directly to the boss and asked if I can please have an internship there, and then he agreed to see me the next week, and I could start the internship the week after. So this was very successful for me because I could work in a working atmosphere. Other people were also working, and people were always happy to answer my questions. They would even stop by from time to time asking what I'm doing. So yes, this was a very good time for me. By the way, these dots will be available as stickers, magnets, and M&Ms later. Yes, and the best, yes, I think that. Then after some time, I listened to my colleagues discussing in the breaks. And of course, at the beginning, I didn't understand a word. So the first thing that came to my mind was that I did have my challenge I wanted. But then I soon realized that not all these discussions were about Ruby. So I realized that I lacked some serious background knowledge. So I decided to start a Master of Advanced Studies in Software Engineering last year. And there I would learn about operating systems, databases, and also other programming languages. Also, in my internship, I realized that there were no female programmers at our company at that time. I was the only one, and I wasn't even a real programmer, just an intern. So I talked to some colleagues, and one colleague of mine, he decided to start a free programming course for women called Ruby Monsters. So I helped him build up everything, and it's been 1.5 years where women can come and learn. It's free, they don't have any commitment, they can just drop by to see if they like it, otherwise they just don't show up anymore. And yes, this is what I've been doing every Monday night since. Also, these women, they have some amazing stories. For example, one lady, she has a 5-year-old daughter that is interested in programming, but she can't learn it by herself because all the tutorials are in English. So she would come to our course in order to teach her daughter later. So I think this is pretty amazing. Also, other people that just work in IT companies and want to know what's going on behind the scenes. Since the 1st of September of this year, I am now a junior software developer at Simplificator. Yes, I do basically the same thing as the other people working on project, but sometimes it takes me a little longer because I don't know yet about some stuff. We do online websites and platforms for customers. So let's talk about some challenges for beginners. These were my challenges, but also I realized for the people I teach that they have almost the same challenges. I realized that many programmers, they take the basic concept of programming for granted because they are already so into it that it's just natural for them, but for a beginner it's not. So let's look at some concepts. The first one is classes versus objects. So at the beginning, I really didn't understand the difference, and people would always say the same sentence, which was, an object is an instance of a class. And I said, I know, but I don't understand what it means. So, yes, and then I would try to figure it out, and then at one point, my internship mentor, he explained it in a way I understood. He said that a class is like a construction plan for a house, and the house is the object itself. So from that point on, I understood what the difference was. Then the next concept is loops. And when I told to a colleague that this was difficult for me at the beginning, he said, but this is the most natural thing. And yes, now it's for me too. But if you can't even imagine what an array or a hash is, you can't understand how to iterate over them. So this took me a lot of getting used to, and after self-study, I thought I understood it, but I had to realize that I didn't. So I had to apply it in projects, and then it became natural for me too. This was the hardest one for me, recursion. So I was very proud when I figured out to do things iteratively, but then I realized that it wasn't all, because once I had a program that was getting slow, and then someone told me, just do it recursively. So yes, so I had to learn it, and still sometimes when I do something iteratively, I just for myself do it recursively to get my brain used to this concept. But I still think it's important for juniors and beginners to learn about recursion, because at some point it will be important for performance. Here is a specific example of a challenge I had. My internship mentor, he gave me this task. He said, write a class that sorts an array. And this is what I did. So I was very proud because I did write a class that sorts an array. But then I showed it to him and he said, "What the hell did you do?" And so this brings me to some dangers of Ruby as a first programming language because there's so much freedom for the coder, these things can happen, and if you don't know about the conventions and the rules of the language, this will be hard if you continue like this. I realized very soon that every programmer I know has a very strong opinion about everything. So these are discussions like mini-test versus RSpec, or rebase versus merge in Git. And at the beginning, this was really hard for me because I would just listen to the discussion, not knowing who was right. So I asked people about their educational background, trying to figure out this way, but this was also wrong. So a specific example of this, and this even started with which monitor to use. So editor, yes. So Sublime, no, RubyMine, it's so cool, but no, you don't need RubyMine because Ruby is so great. So yes, and I didn't know. So a specific example was this one. So I had to program a vending machine. You know the machine you put in coins and you buy a Mars. And this had to have a statistics log. So I did this with a colleague of mine, and he said, well, you already know that you only need one instance of this class. So we make it a singleton. Later, I showed it to another colleague, and he said, well, my rule is never to use a singleton. So we used it anyway, and at the end of the project, they told me to test the whole thing. So I tried to test a singleton. And then I realized that my statistics log was manipulated by my test. So then I read about how to test a singleton, and then it said you have to make a fake instance, which is already violating against the principle of a singleton, so I didn't use it anymore from this point. Which brings me to this one. I soon realized that I have to build my own opinion quickly, even if I change it later, but just stick to something. And at the beginning, I thought I wasn't allowed to have an opinion because I didn't know as much, but actually it became easier now that I built my opinion about most things. Also, reading books helped me a lot. Whenever there was something I couldn't figure out myself or build my own opinion, I would read a book, for example, Pragmatic Programmer or Clean Code. And also for the singleton example, I read Headfirst Design Patterns. Yes, so this helped me building my own opinion. Now I want to talk about Ruby as the first programming language. There are many advantages, I think. For example, I like the syntax for beginners. It's very nice to read and it doesn't seem scary because it's not like mathematical or many symbols that you don't understand. So sometimes if I read a method, it's like a sentence. And I think this is nice if you start programming. Also, there is a lot of good online material. For example, I try Ruby, Code School, and Ruby Monk, which is all about assertion, so you understand tests later. So I think you can come a long way just by doing online tutorials. And also, I like the responsibility that is given to the programmer. For example, in Java, which is a typed language, you always have to say, if you pass a parameter, which type it will be. And if you pass an int instead of a string, the compiler will tell you, you passed the wrong type, please pass a string. And you might change it without thinking. But in Ruby, you are responsible by yourself what you passed. So nobody will warn you, but you will find out eventually, I think. So I think it's important to think about what you're doing early without relying on a compiler. And the most important thing is, I think, with Ruby, people who don't have a technical background and start programming, they have quick success. Because it's very easy, for example, hello world. It's very easy to write it in a file and save it and run it on the console. You already have something compared to Java, so which is a lot more, for the simple output features of the language you have to know. But I think there are also some disadvantages with Ruby. For example, the freedom, as I showed before in my example when I overrode the class array, might be dangerous. And other languages are more difficult to learn. So if you learn Ruby, you don't know about typed languages, so this might be harder. On the other hand, I think it's okay to learn something easier early, and then when you grasp the concept of programming on the whole, you can move on to more difficult languages. Also, the syntactic sugar might be a problem at some point because, for example, if you have attr accessors, and if you never write a getter or a setter by yourself, you might not know what it really does. You just use it. But overall, I would strongly recommend Ruby as the first programming language, especially because of the quick success. And it's very encouraging. There is a very steep learning curve, especially at the beginning. However, I think it's important to learn other languages later, to also know about other types of languages. And if you do that, you will also learn more features about Ruby, because maybe some things you didn't think about before. And if you have a comparison, then you learn more about Ruby as well. Now let's come to the last part. I hope you agree with me, and I'm not wrong if I look into this room, that we don't have enough women in programming. I asked myself, why is that? So the first reason, I think, is the reputation of the job. And with this, I can tell you a story. I was in France, and I met two middle-aged Australian couples, and I had dinner with them and some wine. And at some point, one guy asked me, so what is your job? What are you doing? And I said, I'm a programmer. And he said, no. And I said, yes. And he said, but you don't look like a programmer. And I said, what do you mean, sir? And he said, yes, you don't seem like a person that would like putting in numbers in a computer all day long. And I think this is a problem, because if you don't have a relative or a friend that is a programmer, many people might think like that and never even get close to programming. Another reason is, I think, many women have self-doubts. So they think, and I did too before, that you have to be ridiculously intelligent to be a programmer, and I wasn't at all sure if I can do it. But yes, I think everybody can learn it if they really want to. And the last problem, I think there have been some women in the past that were famous and very good programmers, but they were not recognized for what they were doing. For example, I don't know if you know about the ENIAC program, but this was after the Second World War, where the first electronic computer was invented, and this one was programmed entirely by 5 or 6 women. And they did this without programming languages or manuals or tutorials. So I think there shouldn't be any reason for any woman to think they can't be a programmer. And the problem with that is that this fact was not revealed until 2013. So nobody knew. Then why do we need more women? So I think it's a proven fact that the quality of the output of a company is better if there is diversity in the company. This is not only gender diversity, but also of nationality and many more. And women have different backgrounds than men, usually. So if the pool of ideas and knowledge increases, then there will be the more quantity and quality of the knowledge in the company. So I think for this reason, balanced workspace is preferable. But in order to achieve this, I think it's important to educate people, so people know about what programming is. I don't have a problem if someone knows about programming and they say it's not for me. But I have a little problem if they say they can't be or they don't want to be a programmer when they don't even know what it's about. And Yes, I hope that in some years there will be many role models of female programmers that can spread the word and tell about how great programming is. Because many women also have these wrong concepts. One girl of Ruby Monsters asked me how long it took me to become a programmer. And I said 1.5 years. And she said, well, that's a reasonable time, but I was very bad at mathematics back at school. And I said, yes, I was too. I always failed all my math exams, always. And guess what? Now, in my studies, my best technical mark was data structures and algorithms, which was the only subject where you have to like log n and stuff like that with the formula. So it doesn't mean if you were bad at math as a child that you can't be a programmer. And people have to know this. A GitHub CEO said, everybody has the potential to be a great developer, but not everybody has the opportunity. And you may say this sounds a little dramatic, because we all live in countries where we can choose our own education. But I think a lost opportunity is not only due to political or financial restrictions, but also what society thinks and social pressure can also cause a lost opportunity. So if someone is talented and would be happy as a programmer but never gets in touch with it because of what society thinks, this is also a lost opportunity. And I thought a long time about what we can do. So first of all, offering these courses that have no commitment, I think is a good idea, because if you only even think about it being interested in programming as a woman, normally you don't just enroll in a bachelor's program before you really know. So these courses might be a good opportunity to gain an idea about programming. Also, maybe give a talk at career advice or at schools. I'm still thinking about that. And I started something, I show my work to my friends. So, for example, when I'm picked up by a friend, then I will show her, so look at my code and what it can do, so she can learn about how it looks like. And the last point, I think it's important to tell the teachers. So this is when it starts, when children first are confronted with their talents and also maybe with what they will do later. So if there are teachers that have the mindset that you can be anything, no matter if you're a girl or a boy, then this might encourage women to take technical professions and also men to take maybe nurse classes or something. So to conclude, the first conclusion for myself is that if you really work hard and want something, then you can do it. And when it comes to Ruby as the first programming language, I strongly recommend Ruby as a first programming language, even if you have to accept maybe some syntactic sugar at the beginning. I think you can learn about the details later. When preparing for this talk, I read on the internet what other people say about the first programming language. And one guy said Ruby is the most terrible first programming language because it's of the syntactic sugar. And then I said, okay, it's a point. Then I read on, and he said he would recommend Scheme or C. So I don't know about Scheme, but I had to learn some C for operating systems, and I can tell you for sure that I would not have gone through with programming if I started with C. So I would recommend Ruby. And also, I think we need to get more active to get women in programming. So whatever it is, talk to friends or show your work. I think it's important to spread the word. Because when I talked to a colleague of mine, he said, well, now you chose a man's profession. And I really hope that we don't have to, soon we don't have to call it a man's profession anymore, but that it's normal for everybody to be a programmer. Thank you for your time. No, because I'm a person, when I decide to do something, then I have to do it. So there, I can't go back. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I didn't say that I never felt bad about things not working, but I just tell them that it happens to everybody, and not only the women, it has nothing to do with that. And just maybe at the same time, also learn different things aside the difficult stuff to have success the whole time. Yes, I also think because at that point I didn't even know that I could write my own classes. So I had to look for something that already existed, and I thought that is one. So yes. I think it's just if you're very motivated and you show them how much you really want to do it, then I think most companies like that. Because there are enough people that are not motivated or just work 8 hours and then go home. So I think companies like motivated people. And in this email, I said I really, really want this job, even if it's an internship, it doesn't matter. But I also said, I understand if you can't offer a job, but do you have any recommendations where I could apply? Yes. There is one lady that has been coming since the beginning, just one. So she's been there since 1.5 years. She has 4 children, and she educates 2 of them at home by herself. And the only night she has off is on Monday, and she uses this to learn to be a programmer. So I think this is very amazing. And she didn't speak English that well at the beginning, but she worked so hard. She's been the most constant to come to the courses. She did stuff at home, and now she's doing her own websites. So I think she can't, when her children will be grown up, I'm sure she will go for a programming job, and I'm sure she manages. Yes, we copied the format from Berlin. Yeah. Yes. We thought about this at the beginning, but we decided against it. We read some studies that men tend to be a little competitive. So, no offense. And so women might get discouraged. So we have many male coaches, I think only, except for me. But this is on another level. So they shouldn't feel competition between themselves. This is why we decided only to take women. You mean in programming? I just did the online tutorials for 3 months by myself, and then I basically, in the internship, they told me what to learn. Yes, I think they also knew better when it's time to introduce classes or whatever. It's a lecture for like half an hour at the beginning, introducing a new concept, and then they will work on exercises we prepare for them. Yes, we are enough coaches so that we can basically teach them almost individually. Yes. We have several exercises, and we started now for the 3rd time, and we always adjust it a little. So sometimes we have just a lecture and then exercises, but sometimes we have a project that they can continue the next times. We also always ask them what they want to do. If they want to do a project or more theory, and then we will do what they want. So I didn't come up with it, it was my colleague. I just helped him from the beginning, and no, he had the idea before because he also realized that we don't have enough women. And there is Rails Girls, which is just a weekend. And I coached at Rails Girls in Helsinki. And this is really just, you have to build your website. So it's copy-pasting everything, HTML, Rails, and you have no idea what's going on. I mean, maybe you're proud that you could actually produce something, but nobody understands what's behind it. So we said it's better to have a course that is continuous and not just a weekend. We always advertise at Rails Girls. And also now I'm in touch with different institutions in Switzerland with ICT, which is the IT institution, and with career advice, so they will put it in their databases so people that are interested can see it and then join.